I'll just go into DC fast charging studies really quick. And okay. So the next tool or next area of research we've been looking a lot at is DC fast charging. What is the applicability of DC fast charging? When will it be used? And how often will it be needed, given different vehicle ranges? So again, I work on this with Gil and Tom. Wade's been doing a lot of work with this, and also Justin with Jack. So I like to put this slide up first. There's use cases for fast chargers, and what exactly does the tool do, and what doesn't it do? And so we know that there's different use cases, and this picture on the right is in San Francisco. San Francisco is a destination for some people, so people come from far away, and they may need to go to San Francisco, and they may even have time to park at a level 2 station. Let's say you're a Leaf and you're 60 miles away. I will go and I will park at a level 2 station, and I can park for 4 hours and get back to where I want to go. But due to congestion, you may not be able to depend on that charger. So a level 2 backup is one of those situations where you might use DC fast. And there might be people, for example, in San Francisco that have only level 1 at home. They might need kind of an extra home-based charger when 1.5 kilowatts is not enough to satisfy all of their travel. And then there's the more classic case of a corridor fast charger, where this is in between two regions. And if you're familiar with California, Cordelia is between Sacramento and San Francisco. And so this might be a place where people would stop mid-journey and to continue their journey. And some of these other cases, those are not captured in the fast charger model we're looking at. We're looking at people who do these long trips, and we're connecting two places together. So in one tour, we call it, from home to home, they actually they need charging in between those two destinations, or their trip is too long to accomplish without fast charging. So for the tool, we look at those, and then there's other strategies to look at the other cases for fast charging. So as an example, and I don't know if this will work, I don't think there's animation. Oh, okay. Well, this is a tour. It's a 130-mile tour. If you look at the graph on the top left, you see that they start at home, and then their battery state of charge goes down in terms of miles left. And at some point, they will need to fast charge. And they'll get up to 80%, continue on their journey, and they might need to fast charge again. But on the way, they'll pass many chargers, and they won't need to charge because you won't go past lower than 20% or something like that. And so this is an example of a tour where you have two destinations. One is the airport, the other is Vacaville, and then you return back home. And so you assume you have charging at home, and if you were to complete this tour in this car with these assumptions, you would need two fast charging events. So that's how we kind of break things up. And so we can find out when, with a travel demand model, we know when people start their trips, when they will pass by certain places, and so we can aggregate in terms of time and location. Let's take, for example, this DC Fast Davis. How many people in the aggregate will need this one station throughout a day based on regular travel patterns? And so this person needed DC Fast Davis once. He would be reflected in this graph on the time of day when he would need it. And then we see that 7 people, for example, would need this particular location in Dublin under a certain scenario, 7 events in 1 hour. And so what we can say about this, if it were a 50 kilowatt charger, you probably would need at least 3 fast chargers to handle that peak demand. So you can look at peak demand. There are 40 events throughout the day, but this location would need at least 3 fast chargers to handle that demand. That's one thing we can look at in the tool. Another thing I like to do is look at fast charging in the context of all the other charging events. So there's home charging, there is level 2 charging at work, there's public charging, and then what's left for fast charging, assuming fast charging is your last resort. So let's just take, I have 3 different scenarios here, 60-mile, 80-mile, and 100-mile vehicle. And so what can you do with, how much of VMT in California could be accomplished with these certain range cars, assuming you don't want to go below like 16 miles left. Actually, there's a couple different assumptions in here, but it's around 60%, 70%, or 80% for those 3 range vehicles. If we look at just, guess that got messed up, but we're going to look at the 80-mile range vehicle, and 71% of miles can be done from home. How do you get the other 29% of miles in terms of workplace charging, other public level 2, and then fast charging? And so if you had work level 1, you could actually get around 4.8% for this 80-mile vehicle. And that red line is 29%, so that's the that'll get from 71 to 100%, that's 29%. So 4.8% of that 29% could be done with level 1. You would need workplace 3.3 kilowatts for some people, and then some people would need 6.6. And so the point here is that people spend a lot of time at work, and you could actually, because people sometimes, this takes into account exactly how long people park in the travel model. Because people park a long time and they don't necessarily travel that far, you could actually, let's say you get 30 miles from a level 1 vehicle. That means your 70-mile vehicle or 80-mile vehicle could become a 120-mile vehicle. And so basically the charging increases the range of a car. And so basically it tells you how many people could get by with 120 miles in a day. And some people need farther or faster charging as well. So how much does, if you charge as much as you can at work, how much is left for public level 2? I think this is at 1.5-hour stops. It's about 4%. And then if you look at one fast charge event, if you do all the level 2 you can, what's left for fast charging? What's the application? So 6% for one fast charge event. If you allow 2 fast charging events, this is based on the threshold that people will stop, then you could get another 5.7%. And then there's these trips that are fairly unlikely, which is, probably you just take another car. And even actually, the 2 fast charge events, a lot of people won't do that either. So this is in context. And so actually, this is what we asked in a survey. How many quick charge events would you find reasonable on an occasional basis? And you can see most people would stop once. We actually had an error in our survey, and we assumed that people have a fast charging port on their car. They're willing to stop once, but we didn't. It's somewhere lower than 100%. But we see at least for people willing to stop twice, it's about, it's 51%. And then there's only 13% of people who are willing to stop 3 times in a day. And so these long trips in a Leaf going to Los Angeles probably aren't going to happen. And we see that would take maybe 8 fast charge events, and you see like 0% of the population would really want to do it. There was one guy who said he wanted to do it. He really wanted to go as far as possible and spend the entire day. But you see there's a drop-off in demand. And so what we do in our model is we use this number of fast charging events to clean out, based on battery size, the trips that probably won't happen in that vehicle, and it's reflected in the fast charge demand of the car. As you increase the range of the vehicle, different trips become possible under these thresholds. So a 2 fast charge trip in a BEV 200 is a much longer trip that would just be cleaned out in most cases in a shorter range vehicle. So I'm not going to look at that. And this is, when you start looking at that graph, you think, oh, great, this box on the far left, in that same example, this is a slightly different scenario, but let's say 69% of miles are possible from home. You could actually get almost all but 1.72% if you had a fast charge network out there. But 10.8% of those trips won't happen because people don't want to stop so many times. And so you can split up, you can see, for example, this 8.29% is split in half based on how many people would stop twice. So your applicability goes down. And then also, if you add in workplace charging, you see some trips fall out in that case too. So level 2 has an interaction with fast charging as well. and we try to put some of those interactions, or we do put some of those interactions in the tool. So you assume what kind of trips you're looking at. Are they workplace trips or non-workplace trips? We think non-workplace trips are work-based trips are more likely to be done with fast charging. Everyday people aren't going to be fast charging, so we have the ability to split those out. So another thing that happens is your distribution of locations changes. If you have a BEV80, you'll see it much more charging, very close to home. If it's a BEV300, it's kind of the same thing. And you can also pick out, if you have a BEV200, you see a lot of the in-town and intra-regional or inter-regional trips and need goes away. And then if you go to BEV300, this is a certain scenario. You can run all these scenarios yourself. You won't exactly be able to reproduce this, but you see that most of the demand ends up on longer distance corridors. So locations that were not important for BEV80s now become important for BEV200 and BEV300. And so you see a shift in the amount and location of demands for different sized vehicles. And you can actually look at, with the tool, you can look at what is the portion of demand coming from BEV80s, BEV200s, and whatever you decide to put in there. So the point is that there's a declining number of fast chargers needed as batteries get larger. However, it doesn't really go away. As you get larger and larger batteries, different trips become possible. All these gray regions are possible with longer range cars. And so the demand doesn't go away, and this is, again, only the demand from these corridor trips based on a model. There's a lot of different parameters you can get in here to make this look a little different. And again, there might be some more destination level 2 backup based demand and some home-based demand. So this is from the corridors. So again, what you put in is what you get out of the model. That's why we give you the tool to make your own assumptions on what you think is reality. And so we give you some direction, but we let you be the ultimate decider on what goes on. So final thoughts is DC fast charging is useful even as battery size gets larger. Different trips become available to people with larger range vehicles, and so the location switches, but the applicability does not necessarily switch. And again, I caveat this also that backup level 2 is not reflected, so you may end up with more demand than this. There's different dynamics that probably will happen with larger battery BEVs that we'll find out, and a lot of it could be based on price and such. So that is the final thoughts. Okay, can you unmute? Yep.
The conference has been unmuted.
So I guess questions in the room. Any questions on fast charging in the room? Okay, on the phone, is there any questions? All right.
Oh, hey, Mike.
Yeah.
You said that the travel model survey, was that done by UC Davis or the Caltrans?
Oh, that's a very good point, and we'll go through this when we go through the tool run-through, but it was based on the Caltrans model, and yeah, the 2012 Caltrans travel model, and that's one of the data sets we've got a okay from Caltrans to share an anonymized version of that. So we can look at those long-distance travel corridors within California and what's the frequency and location of those trips and timing as well. Yeah, of course.
Hi, Mike. This is on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So this just talks about kind of the need and the benefits of fast charging, but this doesn't really address kind of any of the aspects of a business model for fast charging, right?
No. It's just how many people would even need it, and so
right.
If they need it, then and they're willing to stop based on timing, then you have to start looking at your business strategy as far as pricing and those things.
Right, but it could be used very effectively on the public side to kind of support the argument for continuing support for fast charging.
Yeah, I think that is actually, since it can be done statewide, I think that is one of the things we see a lot of interest in is kind of how might this develop over time based on how people travel, and what is the location and maybe even power needs more spatially resolved. But I think actually a company could use it as well, because if there's more demand or potential demand, you can try to satisfy that demand. Oh yeah, question in the room.
So is the tool intended in part to allow an employer who is potentially considering adding workplace charging to go out and survey his employees? Is that part of the assumption that the employer would actually survey the employees to find out if they had an EV, how far they drive to work, and that usage? Which way is the model driving?
No, you could actually. I mean, with just the research part, yeah. If you were an individual workplace, you probably wouldn't be running a statewide model or even a regional model. You actually could take and interview people. Yeah, how far do you go? And then you could get an estimate. Or what kind of car do you think you might drive? How many people are there? And then you could come up with some sort of estimate, but not necessarily for the tool, which we haven't shown yet. But
right.
Yeah, for the workplace charging tool, yeah, you'd probably look more at the research if you're an individual company.
We've got an online question. Can you speak to how price affects the DC fast charge model?
That's a very good question. We haven't dealt with price as much in the DC fast charge because there frankly hasn't been as much out there. So yeah, we're simply reflecting the amount of people, the number of people who would want to do it. Now, if I were to guess, and this is since I'm sitting here, I can guess, but I think the important point in DC fast charging is gas price parity. People are probably going to look at what are their alternatives. Am I going to fast charge? And you have to look at both the price of home electricity plus the price of fast charging to get a total cost of a trip. Not like people are necessarily going to do that. But the point is you could maybe make, on a per mile basis, fast charging slightly more expensive than gas, but I think you've got a threshold on how high you can go. But I think people are trying different pricing models, and there may be, for example, if you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, you're going to spend, you don't care about the price of gas. You're just going to need it, and you're going to be able to pay for it. There will always be that need out there. And for those people, you could charge double. And the more cars you have, the more likelihood that will happen on an occasional basis. So I would say that the model does not reflect any of those sensitivities. Okay, and I think I'm going to is there any more questions on the phone? Okay, so we'll